There are three key networks that deliver electricity in the United States. They are the Western, Eastern, and Texas grids. Together, they are comprised of more than 160,000 miles of transmission lines and 55,000 electric substations.
Perhaps one of the worst parts about it, though, is that you really only need to take out one of the grids to cause a national catastrophe.
Where the power is actually created at the power plant, there's a transformer that increases the voltage so it can actually travel a long distance. And then there's a transformer that steps down that voltage so it can actually be sent to your house.
An extra high voltage transformer, or what is called an EHV transformer, it's the foundation stone of our modern civilization. These EHV transformers are to our civilization what aqueducts and roads were to the Roman Empire. Our society can't operate without it.
But experts tell For the Record that EHV transformers are the most unprotected critical infrastructure assets in the nation.
They are one of the most technologically difficult things to manufacture in the modern world. Every EHV transformer plays a unique role in the grid. It's custom made for the grid, and the windings actually have to be done by hand. They're hand built. And while we exported the technology for the electric grid to the world, like so many things, like the airplane, like the automobile, we used to build them and we exported these things to the world, but now we have to import them from overseas. And there's only 2 countries in the world that build them for export purposes, South Korea and Germany. And it takes 18 months, a year and a half, just to build one. And so that's why, someone armed with a sniper rifle, attacking the transformers at San Jose, that if they were to use, simple technologies to destroy these transformers, it could strike at the heart of our civilization.
In response to security risks exposed by the San Jose attack, FERC conducted a classified study in 2013. According to the Wall Street Journal, that study revealed alarming results.
And they didn't want the report publicized because our vulnerability is so great, where they concluded that an attack on just 9 out of 55,000 substations, that if you knew which 9 substations to attack, you could basically plunge the whole United States into a blackout that would last 18 months.
Concern over whether the U.S. is actually prepared to respond if our power grid is compromised, to cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright. Morgan, ironically, I think where I read is that one of the good things we have going for us is our grid is so old, it might be, it might not be smart enough to be compromised.
Yeah, look, all you have to do, Charles, is watch a natural disaster, and you'll see that our power grid is still fragile. We're doing a lot better at protecting it, but that's the problem. It's kind of the analogy of saying, well, I could go 2 rounds with Mike Tyson back in the day. Yeah, well, you still can't go 15. We've got to be able to go that full 15 rounds and survive a direct attack. Look, Russia's been using Ukraine as their punching bag for a lot of years, so our lessons we need to learn are for watching what they're doing in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, I remember it wasn't long ago when we had a major power outage in the Northeast that was caused by a small incident in Canada. So it stands to reason we're extraordinarily vulnerable, and we've been vulnerable for a long time. Why don't we fix this?
Look, if you look at the patchwork that is called the energy grid, I mean, it is a collection of a lot of different things, a lot of different power stations, a lot of different technologies. They're transitioning, trying to make things more network-oriented, trying to beef up their cybersecurity, but that brings its own problems because now we're trying to connect older systems to network technology, and that's one of the flaws that they took advantage of in the Ukraine attack. They attacked these cables that connected the power systems to the computer networks and physically damaged them. So yeah, there's a lot of work we still have to do on this, Charles, but the biggest thing you're talking about is that recovery piece. We know we're going to get attacked. The question is, how fast can we reconstitute and recover our energy? Because if you want to go after a nation, as Deidre was saying at other things, it's a maximum war. Go after their power, go after their water, and you can bring a nation to its knees.
Well, wouldn't it be smarter, though, to be able to beef up our defenses rather than have to figure out a way to reboot this aged system here that we have, this patchwork we've already got?
That could be part of the infrastructure spending. We keep thinking of bridges and tunnels. They're going to be there. What really affects us are things like our IT information systems, the OPM breach you and I have talked about before. All of these aging infrastructures, including the energy one, we've got to spend an equivalent amount of money to beef up our infrastructure because you know why? We've got autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles coming. And if we can't protect the energy grid, how are we going to protect unmanned vehicles bouncing around the 101 like a bunch of pinballs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a glaring issue. It's an issue everyone knows about. What's the problem here? Is it money? And I'm sure it is. And ultimately, where does it come from? Whose responsibility is it? Is it a local responsibility? Is it a federal responsibility? And what role does private business have with respect to putting in money into the solution?
Right. I think Milton Friedman said it best. He said there's no such thing as a free lunch. At the end of the day, guess who's probably going to pay? Us, the consumers, in our electric bills. But 85% of the critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector. But it still needs government leadership, certain things around mandates. You don't want unfunded mandates, so there has to be some partnership. And I'll tell you what's probably the best thing the government can do right now. They're trying to do it through these things called ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers. But it's sharing that intelligence, that forewarning, doing a better job of preparing us for these types of attacks. But look, it will not be solved overnight, but it will take some regulation. Right. It'll take some money. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, probably who's going to pay for it are you and me when we see our electric bills. That's the cost of defense. That's what goes into keeping the lights on.
Although I tell you, I'd rather pay for that than a bunch of windmills. Let me just real quickly ask you this. Russia has the capability, I'm sure, or getting there. So does China. Do any rogue actors have that ability now, if they wanted to turn off lights around this country?
Yeah, Charles, I was in a documentary called True Iran, and we talked about the cyber threat of Iran. They were actually in a dam up in New York, and they would have been able to successfully take over that dam except for a routine maintenance, which disconnected the network. So we already know that Iran is acting in our critical infrastructure as well. North Korea, we'll see if this détente overture is going to make an effect on them, but they're the players I worry about. Those four are the quartet that I worry about, the four horsemen.
As you can see, we're in the dark. And it's not just a belated nod to Halloween. It's a taste of what one noted journalist says could happen if a hacker managed to sabotage America's power grids. Our cover story is reported by Chip Reed.
When the lights go out, we usually know why.
Hurricane Sandy coming ashore on the East Coast.
Mother Nature is at it again. Most of the time, we manage to get through it. But what if the power went out in a number of states, affecting millions of people for weeks, even months?
As you were researching this, did you personally find yourself getting frightened?
I think frightened is a little bit too strong, but maybe I should have been. Yes, it's frightening. It is frightening enough that my wife and I decided we were going to buy enough freeze-dried food for all of our kids and their kids.
In his book, Lights Out, veteran journalist Ted Koppel paints a grim picture of a paralyzing power outage in the form of an all-out cyber attack on the nation's electrical grid.
Who are the potential perpetrators here? Who do we have to fear the most? Is it Russia, China, Iran, terrorists, individual actors?
All those. The interesting thing, Chip, is the ones who are most capable are the ones least likely to do it.
There are some experts who say they're already in.
Oh, they are in.
They are in.
There is no question about it.
They're into our grid.
They are already in the grid. I was told that by the former chief scientist of NSA.
Tonight, concerned that Russian government hackers have carried out probing cyber attacks on vital U.S. infrastructure, including the power grid, potentially giving the Kremlin the ability to turn off the lights. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI detailed a 2-year multi-stage effort by Moscow targeting hundreds of companies that they believe is still ongoing. The hackers first gained access to small energy-related companies, planting malware that then allowed them to move into larger networks. Once inside the energy suppliers, the Russians collected information on the facility's control systems, attempting to acquire the ability to turn those systems off.
They're identifying targets. They're positioning malware so they could pull the trigger when they wanted to. But they're also sending the United States a message. We are in position to cause harm if we wanted to do it. And so the U.S., should be a little more careful.
A spokesperson for DHS cautions that while hundreds of companies were targeted, the Russians' access was limited and, quote, would not have had any impact on the larger grid if taken offline. The Russians targeted other crucial sectors as well, including nuclear power, water, aviation, and manufacturing. Experts see the intrusions as a possible precursor to an unprecedented Russian cyber attack that could, in the event of all-out war, devastate the U.S. homeland. The director of the NSA and commander of U.S. Cyber Command says that Russia presents a clear and present danger.
Our adversaries will continue to penetrate and try to penetrate such things as our critical infrastructure. What should we do about that? And I think it's both the idea of being vigilant about that, certainly. It's also the idea of being able to act forward.